Well, good morning again. It's my joy to be with you as we continue our study in the book of Mark. And in particular this morning, I love this text. It's a delight to see the challenge of belief lived out in people with complicated, difficult lives. Not just because that's my story and probably your story, but because we need that. We need to see, thank you, and know the way in which God leads us to believe. Because here's the thing, before we read, I just want to tell you, in the middle of this text is one of the harder sayings of Jesus, if we're honest about it, where he tells a man who has just lost his daughter, or thought he lost his daughter, do not be afraid, only believe. Do not be afraid, only believe. And without the challenge of real life, real inability, we can't really understand the good news of the gospel. So this moment of difficulty, challenge, is good for us to see. The Bible doesn't scrub these stories. Here's a man, in particular Jairus, who's focused on here, is a good man. He does a good work. He's a leader of the synagogue, and just so that you know what that means, it doesn't mean he's a teacher. It means he's kind of like a deacon in the way that we understand deacons here, which is that he manages the facility, he makes sure the scrolls are where they belong, and all of those kinds of things. Probably enough to believe that he had earned an easier life, blessings from God. And here's his daughter fading fast. And then there's a woman who has sought every possible means of being healed, is ceremonially unclean, is separated for 12 years from the people and the communities that she loves. The Bible does not scrub these stories. Instead, the Bible says, do not be afraid, only believe. Let's look together at Mark chapter 5. And before I do so, just a reminder, if you have questions about the faith, questions about Christianity, if you want to take issue with something I said in the sermon, and you want to talk about it, please feel free to send a text. You can send that text and I will share that question after the sermon anonymously, won't tell anybody who you are, and I'll do my best to answer it for about 5 to 7 minutes. All right, Mark chapter 5. Beginning in verse 21, following on the heels of the demoniac having his demons cast out last week, Jesus now goes from, you remember, he goes through the storm, the demonic supernatural storm, to get to the other side, to deal with the demoniac, to make him into a missionary, to send him out into the Decapolis, and then he heads back. Here he is on the other side. Starting in verse 21, when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live. And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. Immediately the flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her disease, and Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, as a very helpful comment here, you see the crowd pressing about you, and yet you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Now, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, Only believe. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James, and they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue. And Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. These were professional mourners. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and sleeping? The child is not dead," and weeping. "The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. So, only believe. That's what we're hitting first. As we look at the text this morning, we're seeing this capacity for hope, for real hope. Jesus is saying, there is a capacity to hope, even here. Let me tell you about it. So we're going to start there because I want us to see kind of the heights of the text first, and then we can kind of see the lay of the land around them, right? So we're kind of going to the middle of things. After the daughter dies, Jesus, he looks and he says, "Don't fear, only believe." Now that fear, what he's saying, ultimately is he's saying, don't allow this particular circumstance to move you away from your trust. Because this man had said, "Jesus, heal my daughter." And Jesus is saying, don't lose that. It's not over. Just trust me. Only believe could be cruel in this context. Think about it. If Jesus does not know without a doubt that he's going to raise this little girl, it is an awful thing to say. But he knows he is. Jesus takes this man and pushes him to the edge of himself. Do you believe? He lets him see the very end of his capacity. This man has no ability to do anything. His daughter is dead. What are you going to do now? Jesus is reteaching, helping us understand what capacity is and where it comes from. And we need to know that because, truth be told, I bet for many of us, we struggle with an idea of faith that's been worked into our culture, right? It's Wizard of Oz faith. Wizard of Oz is that great uplifting human story that what you needed was always inside you. You only needed to believe in yourself, right? You wanted to be courageous. Well, you were always courageous. You wanted to be faithful. Well, you were always faithful. And listen, that understanding is not what Jesus means when he says your faith has healed you to this woman. And we'll see exactly what he means by that. He's not saying that what is going to happen here is you're just going to discover, people, how faithful you really are. What he's saying is that you need to grab hold of the fact that you have no other option. Only believe. Now, our culture holds two things in tension all the time. And so we tend to think, look, religion's just a crutch. I'm a realist, not a religious person, right? And so we tend to look at religious faith as kind of a fallback position. But the culture holds two ideas, and those two things are in tension. We believe that the world is unenchanted. There's no high, no low. There's no magical things. There's no supernatural stuff. We live in a materialistic view of the world. But at the same time, we also believe that human beings somehow have the ability in their lives to live it to their fullest so that they can be completely satisfied. So we believe that there's an unenchanted world, but somehow we believe that you and I are powerful enough that this life and all that we have in it could meet our greatest longings, our hopes, and our dreams. So what that means ultimately is that we bear this burden all the time to get the very best out of life, to make ourselves satisfied. It drives us weary, restless. So here we have this idea, no, you can only believe. That's all you can do here. Jesus is saying, this is the only thing that you can do. We don't believe in the supernatural, but somehow we believe in ourselves supernaturally. So what's going to happen? Jesus says it's not going to work this way. Because believe in yourself might sound good. It might make for a good commercial now and then. It might be heartwarming until you're at a point where you have no ability to believe in yourself because you've seen yourself and you're not who you thought you were. Then what? If I tell you believe in yourself, that's fine sometimes, but it's always in easy situations where we can believe in ourselves. Hey, you're going to run those hurdles, believe in yourself. Going to do a good job at work. You know what? Don't worry about it. Just believe in yourself. We don't do that when things are really tough. When it's really tough, we don't know what to say. A couple of years ago, there was this community where I lived. It was a particularly wealthy community, very competent. The people who lived there were big accomplishers. I mean, they had done everything you would expect them to do. Their kids were involved in everything. Everybody was beautiful. You know, those kinds of communities, right? There was a Craigslist ad that was specific to that town, and the Craigslist ad said, free to whoever needs it, 2 boxes, Captain Crunch. Now, this thing took off. People were amazed. Who does this, right? But then the reaction changed. The reaction became not just like, this is hilarious, but it became, I was moved to tears when I saw this man offer up even his boxes of Captain Crunch, right? And the reason why it started to move people is because they recognized this. They started to realize this guy was speaking the truth. He was vulnerable. He said, hey, I know somebody needs this, and this is all I have. I don't have much, but I can give my 2 boxes of Captain Crunch. So what he was saying is he was saying, you and I, we live in a world with big longings and little capacity. We are not able to get what we want out of this life. And we're so weary and we're so exhausted and we're constantly pushing. And then when we achieve, or at least we come to almost achieve what we were pursuing, we find it wasn't enough. And so this guy is saying, look, all I've got to give, let's just boil it down. We all need Captain Crunch, and I've got 2 boxes. People were moved. People were weeping. Because people are exhausted, trying to carry a supernatural burden for their ordinary life. C.S. Lewis talks about those longings, and he says that every longing that we have normally has some kind of corresponding thing, right? You long for good food because you have taste buds and you enjoy it, right? You long to run because you have the ability to run. And Lewis said that the longings that we have that aren't met are proof of a world beyond ours. We all experience, when told to just believe, the fear that our deepest longings are not going to be met, that they can't be. And so what Christianity says ultimately is it says, I'm going to deal with the supply side of things. I'm not just going to tell you to believe. I'm going to supply the opportunity. I'm going to supply the capacity to believe. Romans chapter 4, verse 16 says it depends, faith or salvation depends on faith in order that it may rest on grace. Your capacity comes from God so that you might live by grace. So when Jesus says only believe, he's driving us to a place of grace to see only God could meet our supply. Only God can do it. Not believe in yourself. There's something far better. So this first part of our text is just driving us to the point where we see, okay, the heart of it is grace from God. Now, I want to back up a little bit and look at the 2 portions surrounding this, right? That we see not just a capacity for real hope, but now a reason for it. So verses 24 through 35 and then 37 through 41 cover these 2 healings. The woman shows up. She's had a flow of blood for 12 years. She has been separated from the religious community because she would make people unclean ceremonially. So she's not in the synagogue community. She's lost certainly big parts of her everyday community because if you walked even into her home, you would be unclean until the evening, right? So she's living this disconnected life. She has no pathway forward. She's stuck. So what does she do? She comes up, the word says she comes up behind Jesus and she grabs hold of his garment. You may wonder, why is she doing this? But in the Greco-Roman world, it was a fairly strong understanding that if somebody had an aura, a power, that you could contract it by touching them. Alexander the Great would regularly be mobbed by people who were just seeking to touch parts of his body, his leg, his knee, his arm, because when you did that, you could gain some kind of power, right? So she's doing this. She's coming up behind him in the middle of this throng, just trying to grab hold of something. She's incredibly vulnerable here. She's really risking it. And listen, I want to tell you this morning that I feel like this is attractive. This is an attractive idea of faith for many of us. That when you show up to church, you're just kind of hoping to receive something from God without him really seeing you. That if you can reach him and draw some goodness, if you can be a little bit better, a little bit holier, and not be seen for all the insufficiency beneath the surface, all the broken things beneath the surface, maybe you can be okay. Friends, if we're going to believe the gospel together as a church, we have to fight this tendency to hide our weakness and our brokenness from God himself. There was a man who made the observation recently that marathon runners have taken on a new custom when they finish races. Now, not being a marathon runner, I'm taking this on faith. It will surprise you, not a marathon runner. But the custom is this, that as people are finishing these incredible races, one of the first things they're doing, sometimes immediately after, is they're running to their phones to upload the map of their run. Because it's almost like, did you run if everybody else didn't know that you ran and followed along with your map, right? That the joy of running has almost been overcome by the need to share about it because you want to be covered in the goodness of having run a marathon, right? Well, this guy, quite entrepreneurial, noticed that there is a market that he had discovered, and the market was this, that if he used AI, he could create convincing running maps that he could sell so that people could upload them to their running apps as if they ran those races. No, I am not talking about you, all right? I know you would never do this, and you're amazed that somebody would fake it, right? But here's what it showed him. The reason he knew he could make a buck doing this is because he knows that human beings are driven to whatever will satisfy the need for validation and wholeness. He knew that if they covered themselves in a running map, one that they didn't run themselves, that they would somehow feel more content, more whole. This woman who came to Jesus, and maybe all of us who show up in worship this morning, she had the insufficient self that was real, but she wanted to cover it in the fake self. The fake self was the one who could steal a healing from Jesus, and then later on people could ask, what happened to you? And she could say, well, I've just, I'm healed. And maybe even people wouldn't have to know about it. Maybe people wouldn't know that she was unclean. Maybe she could avoid all of that. When you show up to worship, we make that as hard as Jesus does. We make you confess sins because we have to confess them. We have to be forgiven. We have to be exposed. We have to be vulnerable to understand the gospel. So what happens here? Christianity has a different idea. What Christianity does is it says, look, you're going to be a new creation. And that creation isn't going to be yours, it's going to be his. And it's not going to be just a map, you're going to be transformed. Christianity says, look, what you're going to gain is you're actually going to gain a new, real self. which is sufficient because it is Christ himself. It doesn't cover you over so that no one knows your vulnerability. Instead, it says, no, you now take upon yourself the actual record of Jesus Christ. You become a new thing. That's a great reason to hope in the future. It's a great reason to hope in hard times because you have upon you the actual righteousness of Christ. So what's going on here? There's salvation that shows up for this woman. She's saved, but not by her own account, not by anything that she's done. Your and my world is far less realistic. We say, well, sure, you can make yourself better. You can reinvent yourself. You can call yourself whatever you want to. You can gather up that kind of virtue and you can sell it. You can buy the fake map. You can make yourself virtuous. And that's how you'll have hope. Christianity says, no, we look at the real person. We don't flinch at the sin. And we say that real sinner can have an even realer and bigger grace. This is the hope of the gospel. Now there's a daughter who's dead. So we have this woman who's saved. Then we have a daughter who's dead. And Jesus says, okay, now, do you really believe? Do you want to go, do you want to go through with this? Do you want to follow? And so he brings this this man into the room with him and his disciples and the wife. And now, by the way, Jesus has been made unclean multiple times. Now he's in a house with a dead body and he's walking in and he's going to touch her, as we read. He is unflinchingly going into the pit of things. And what he does is he goes and he takes upon himself all of the uncleanness. He takes upon himself all of the wrongness, the deadliness, all of that stuff he puts on himself. The chronically ill woman needed someone to bleed for her. She needed to see that somebody else not only would bleed for her. Jairus needed to see somebody who would storm the gates, who would descend into death to bring resurrection. Jesus makes an incredible exchange here. My life for your death. My cleanness for your uncleanness. That's the gospel. You have to have both of those, friends. You can't just go and be healed without vulnerability. You must give Jesus that sin, that brokenness, that not rightness. You must be vulnerable and broken by the gospel. What Jesus does is he ultimately he is running toward this kind of brokenness and sin. And so what do we see? We see in Hebrews chapter 9, the real story of this kind of healing. Take a look. When Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, he entered once and for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. He goes in, he deals with sin, and he does it by becoming the bleeder. He does it by swallowing up sin and death and what's broken. On the cross, one person bleeds, another person stops bleeding. That's you and me. We don't pay the price. He does. We don't make things right. He does. Only believe puts Jesus in there as the object of our faith. So you might ask, is it realistic to hope in Christ? Is it more realistic? And my answer to you is yes. Romans 5:8-9 says that we know God's love because he loved those who were his enemies. He loved us first while we were his enemies. What's the reason for belief? The reason for belief is divine love placed on God's people who didn't deserve it. So you better get comfortable with the part of you, with the whole of you that didn't deserve God's love. It's the only way you're going to understand the gospel. You have to see the great exchange. That's what Jesus is doing. He's not just inconvenienced here, he's polluted. By the way, Jesus makes it really clear if you're going to miss anything. You remember, this woman walks up to Jesus behind him and touches him, and you remember what Jesus says? Well, who touched me? Now, we know enough about Jesus now to understand that he is not missing the point. He's not ignorant. He is omnipotent. He is all-knowing. So what's going on here? Jesus is drawing her out. He's not going to allow her an impersonal, anonymous healing. He wants us to see, and you know what else he wants us to see? Not just that she's been healed, but he wants us to see that he's been made unclean. He makes the announcement public, this woman touched me. When he goes into the house with the dead girl, I was in there. I touched her. Jesus makes it very clear that he loves, that he pours himself out, that he takes upon himself our sin. Now, what happens when you have a capacity for real hope and a reason for real hope? That what we see at the end of this text is that there's an assurance that comes as a result. There's an assurance in the text. Now, I want to ask you this question. What would you have done? Jesus raises your daughter and then he says, now give her some food. I think there'd be a part of you that would be like, we're just going to go on with life? This is okay? We'd have to swallow the fact that Jesus is saying yes. No payment. Your daughter's raised. When Jesus heals the woman, the chronically ill woman, he says, go in peace. Go in peace. Let's remember what's true about her. She's destitute financially. She's in despair. She has no friendships, probably. She's been separated. She has been hurt, broken. And now Jesus says, go in peace. Go in wholeness. Now, this was written 2,000 years ago, and there have been a lot of people who have read the book of Mark who have lost children. And those children have not been returned to them. There are a lot of people who read this who have had chronic illness. And that chronic illness has not been healed. And so my question as I read this was, how is it possible that Jesus would expect us to hear sermons preached about this text and to read it knowing that we have not experienced what these people have and be happy about it? I'll tell you why. We have to go back to the healing again of this woman. The chronically ill woman has an interesting order to her healing. Jesus says, go in peace, your faith has made you well, and be healed of your disease, right? What comes first? She's made well. The language there strongly implies salvation. You've been saved. And you are healed. Both things. The order of that is critically important. Because what Jesus is showing to us this morning is that the assurance is this: you first, all who come to Jesus may not be healed like this woman, but all who come to Jesus will be made well. All will be made well. All who come to Jesus will be forgiven of their sins, will be welcomed into his forever family, will be secure in their hope. They will belong to him. All who come to Jesus will be made well. Every single one of them. That's why many of these who have lost daughters and sons or their health or their minds, they were able to say, look, my life might not be the same what it was. My health might not be the same. My pocketbook may not be the same. I may not have the same number of people around the dinner table that I used to, but I have been forgiven, beloved, destined for a greater homeland. by one who exchanged my sin for his righteousness. And because of that, I know that I cannot lose what's most important. And I can never be made truly destitute, truly alone. That all of my earthly suffering has to stop at the grave. Because I have been made well. Not all will be healed, not in the same way, not in this life, but all will be made well. I want to apply that in a kind of ordinary way for you this morning and just say a daily discipline of gratitude, of thanksgiving to God is vitally important. What I mean by that is framing your life, no matter what your circumstances are, as grace received from God. Vitally important. It's the reason why Christians for millennia have been able, through tears of pain and grief, still give thanks. The reason why Paul, why James, why the apostles and prophets have been able to say, we can thank God in the middle of trial. Why? Because we've been made well. Even if we need to be healed, we've been made well. Friends, if you want to disciple your children in the gospel, this is one of the places you have to start. Have you been made well? That comes first. That's foremost. Even more so than your healing, you must see on a daily basis, I have been made well. So force yourself into the discipline of giving thanks daily basis. I do it at night. It's helpful for me to think about the day that way. I want to encourage you in that. And I also want to encourage you this morning, I want to have one more application, which is to fathers. It's Father's Day, men. We've been holding on through all the Mother's Day shenanigans and the celebrations. We knew it was coming. Father's Day. It's here. Get your construction paper ties ready. It is Father's Day. But look, some of you grieve the day. Some of you who aren't dads wish that you were. Some of you have complicated relationships with this day because of your relationship with your earthly fathers. What the gospel offers you this morning is this. The most well you can be, the best dad, human being you can be, is to be made well in Christ Jesus. Your faith can give you peace. Your faith remind you of your assurance. If it rests in Jesus, you can be assured even when the pieces of your life are not adding up. We don't look like the other dads. You're missing the six-pack. You don't run the ultra marathons. Your grass is just a shame. Even in those times, even in those places. And I want to talk to you who grieve fathers, who aren't fathers, and tell you that the very best you can have is the Heavenly Father who makes you well. I want to encourage you, dads, not to grab hold of the earthly trinkets, the private healings. I don't want you to chase after the respect of a son or the validation of a father. It's not enough. Dads, you have all that you need in Jesus Christ, in his sufficiency. Now, that's hard to believe, and it is hard to do this job in this day and in this time. It's really hard. So the church is going to come alongside you, and I just want to encourage you to tell you that soon we will pursue a monthly gathering about 9 months out of the year, not every month. And that time will be focused on sharing our stories, hearing from other men about the work of being a Christian and being a man and being a father at the same time. We're going to be a little bit of a pack together, encourage one another, and grow in grace together. We're going to do that together as part of the church because it's hard. And so, dads, when you fail, which will be often, even today on Father's Day, I want you to believe on Jesus. Make the great exchange. Give your sin to him, receive his forgiveness, and teach your children to do the same. Don't let your sons grow up thinking that the best hope they have is to be like you. May they grow up to know the God who receives their sin and who makes them righteous. Christians, we've been believing in the gospel, only believing in the gospel, because we learned, like Jairus, like the woman, and then so many people who run into Jesus time and time again, we've been learning that when all you have is being made well by Christ, it is all you need. May we continue to believe that, to teach that, to rejoice in that, today like every day.